Bill's Playground. Hooray!
The Celebrity Jobber Podcast with Jeff Zito. If you like what you hear, please subscribe, give a 5-star rating, and leave a review. Check out all our past episodes on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you pod. What if these celebrities weren't famous? What would they have become? What was their first job? We're about to find out.
So if you're 50 years old or under, or if you have kids that are under 50, you probably know who Bill Nye the Science Guy is. He had an educational program running for years, and they showed it in the classroom all the time. You know, you don't think of scientists as having a sense of humor, but it's different with Bill. It kind of broke the mold with this guy. But there's a reason for that. He kind of had a brief career in comedy, which we're about to find out right here on Celebrity Jobber with our guest, Bill Nye, the Science Guy.
Vito, it's been years.
It has been years. You know, we did speak once many years ago. So how have you been?
I've been like always, only more so.
Okay. I see you still haven't lost that sense of humor.
Well, you better not. If you lose your sense of humor, life is especially grim.
You know what's funny?
But go ahead.
I was just going to say, Bill, you know what's funny? Scientists aren't usually funny people.
What makes you say that? I know a lot of scientists, and they're very funny.
Maybe it's because I don't know many scientists?
That could be. That's a question. Yes.
So can we dive deep into the Bill Nye the Science Guy origin story? Because obviously the kids know you. Well, not even the kids anymore. I remember my son used to watch your show, but he's in college now. And I think that's pretty cool that he watched your show when he was young and now he's in college. So it seemed like you put him on that path. That's good stuff. You can't say that for SpongeBob.
You had hardly any influence on it. It was all me. Half hour every week back in the 1900s. No, it's great.
So tell me a little bit about where you're from and where you grew up.
Well, I grew up in Washington, D.C.
Okay.
And one summer day, playing cards on the front porch, I got stung by a bee. And this was traumatic. I was crying. It hurt. My mom put ammonia on the bee sting, and it felt better. Apparently ammonia denatures the bee venom somehow.
Wow.
Breaks it down chemically, yeah. But the ammonia bottle has skull and crossbones on it.
Right.
My mom's trying to kill me, which, I could understand. I was a rambunctious boy. But then, that same summer, or my recollection, let's say, about the same time, in Ripley's Believe It or Not, it said, according to insects which have been flying for 350 million years, according to aerodynamic theory, cannot fly. And even as a kid, I went, hold it, the insects, the bees are flying fine. The problem has got to be with the theory. And this, I'm not kidding, this led to a pattern of inquiry, like question stuff grown-ups tell you.
Right.
Kind of thing. And this is the essence of science, is observation and curiosity.
It's funny you tell that story, Bill. When I used to have poison ivy, my father brought me into the basement, rubbed my poison ivy blisters with a steel brush that you would brush a dog with, and then also rub or pour ammonia on my hands, which, by the way, the poison ivy was gone the next day, and so were a few layers of my skin.
Yeah, I was going to say, that's a catastrophic, traumatic way to deal with it. And just notice, everybody, that his father didn't get poison ivy by scrubbing his wounds. Poison ivy is a autoimmune thing. You're giving it affects you, and that's why many people start out, or that seems to be related to why many people start out seemingly immune to poison ivy. But the more times you're exposed to it, the more times your own immune system responds to it in catastrophic wire brush ammonia kind of ways.
So where did you go to college, Bill?
Cornell, and that was a result of some wonderful clerical error in the admissions department.
Really?
So I think so. I mean, the people I went to college with were so smart.
You're a scientist,
I'm a
Bill.
mechanical engineer. Yeah, well, I'm a mechanical engineer. It's all physics.
So is that what your major was at Cornell, mechanical engineering?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And tell me,
I got a job at Boeing.
That-
if you're ever on a 747, don't worry. My boss looked over things very carefully.
that's amazing. So where did the comedy come from? Because again, to me, and again, you've already corrected me once today and said scientists are very funny people. Maybe I just don't have many interactions with too many scientists.
Depends on the scientist, I think.
This is true.
Bigger sample size. Yeah.
So you got a mechanical engineering degree from Cornell. You go into the workforce as working on Boeing 747s, and then where did you come into comedy?
So what happened was Steve Martin, his first two albums.
Wild and Crazy Guy?
That's the one, yeah, and Get Small. They were so popular so quickly that Warner Brothers Records sponsored this Steve Martin lookalike contest. And I entered in Seattle, and I won.
You're kidding.
In Seattle. No, I'm not kidding about that. And I did not advance beyond Seattle.
Okay.
The guy who ultimately won was from Nashville, could play the banjo, for crying out loud.
Wow.
And so, yeah. He came out on Saturday Night Live before Steve Martin one time, and it was, he was very good. But that aside, after that, I started trying to do my own jokes. And I met these guys at comedy clubs on open mic night, and eventually I quit my job, October 3rd, 1986, roughly.
Were your parents upset with you, Bill, that they spent money for a Cornell education, become a mechanical engineer? You gave it all up to tell jokes on an open mic night at comedy clubs?
Well, I didn't give it all up right away. I mean, with respect, it took sort of 8 years to quit working as an engineer full-time, and another 6 years to quit working as an engineer part-time.
Okay.
There's an expression in the industry. I was a contract engineer. I would come into a company when they had a single, like there's one job to do to get it done designing what's called a tool or tooling.
Okay.
I would do that and then move on. I worked on a volume knob for the airplane radio that is liquid intrusion resistant.
Oh, man, you're losing me on that.
Pilot could spill coffee on the radio and the radio still works.
Oh, okay.
That was one of my one-off jobs.
That's pretty big. That's pretty big.
Well, it's the engineering problem. Here it is. Coffee ruins the radio. We got to keep the coffee from. We can't change where the radio is in the cockpit. It's too well established. There's too many tens of thousands of airplanes with the radio here where the pilots all know where it is. They reach for the volume knob without looking. Can't move it. But they all, I'm sorry, ladies and gentlemen, we have a maintenance issue because I dumped coffee on the radio. You can't have that. So it's a one-off little thing I did at a company called Avtech. It's in Seattle. It's a company that's there because Boeing is there.
Right.
It's a supplier to Boeing. Seattle area has a lot of Boeing aerospace companies.
What was your first job, Bill? Like very first paying job?
I worked in a bike shop. I assembled Jeton bicycles.
Okay, so even as an early age, putting stuff together was your bag.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And then what about your big break?
I mowed lawns. That was
well, yeah.
job.
Yeah. mowing lawns and newspaper routes, stuff like that. But I think
I delivered the Washington Post.
That's cool. Yeah, I delivered the Courier News. We have a lot in common other than the science,
There you
Bill.
go.
But tell me about your big break, Bill. You know, you go the transition from Boeing to the Steve Martin lookalike to the comedy clubs to now hosting Bill Nye the Science Guy. Can you tell me about your big break that led you to that?
Well, so I say all the time, there isn't really a big break. I just really emphasize this to people. There's a whole bunch of breaks. So getting into Cornell I had a great physics teacher in high school. And I got into that high school because my mom really wanted me to go there, my parents. Then I had a great physics teacher and a very good geometry and algebra teacher. Then I got to Cornell, which was remarkable. Then I got a job at Boeing, which was remarkable. Then I won the local, only in Seattle, Steve Martin lookalike contest. That was remarkable. And then I was writing jokes for this local comedy show called Almost Live.
Okay, I remember that.
Out there who knows Joel McHale, he also came from that show.
Okay.
And if anybody out there ever saw or heard of the movie Nebraska, the guy who wrote that movie, Bob Nelson, came from that show.
Interesting.
And then a writer's meeting, the host at the time, Ross Schaefer, just kind of blurted out, why don't you do that stuff you're always talking about? You could be Bill Nye the Science Guy or something. And Ross is still a dear friend of mine. And I did the household uses of liquid nitrogen.
Right.
Because we all have liquid nitrogen around. Of course we do. So if your celery has gone limp, you can make it crisp in a few moments with liquid nitrogen. Then the payoff, I was a young guy in a strange town. I was a volunteer at the Pacific Science Center. I was a science explainer. And on weekends, I would pour liquid nitrogen all over the place. And the thing I got good at is chewing the marshmallows that are frozen in liquid minus 196 Celsius, minus 320 Fahrenheit, something like that. You chew the marshmallows, and steam comes out of your nose.
Wow.
So that was another break. Then that's where the Science Guy was created. And then it took from 1987 to 1992 to do a pilot for the Science Guy show with these producers, Jim McKenna and Aaron Gottlieb, who are still friends of mine, and we did the fabulous wetlands for the Department of Ecology. Washington State is so groovy, it has a Department of Ecology, and they became my co-creators and producers on the Science Guy show. In that case, 5 years later.
Wow.
And then, and so it takes years. It took years to get.
It took years, and here you are celebrating your 30 years in the biz as the Science Guy, and his latest show, The End Is Nigh, which is streaming on Peacock. And, of course, Bill Nye, the Science Guy, a very funny scientist, by the way. Very funny scientist.
Thank you.
And
easier for me than a lot of people. Why?
It's a hell of a lot easier for you than it is for me. That's for sure, Bill.
Yeah, well, I'm sure your audience has picked up. Come on, you're fine. Crying out loud, people.
Thanks so much, Bill. I appreciate your time.
Thank you. All right, carry on.
Kind of a joke when I tell a lot of young people, if they're asking me like what they should major in college, I quickly tell them, communications, which was the degree that I have, it costs the same amount of money as a engineering degree. So, people that come out of college with an engineering degree, I think make substantially more money than a guy coming out of college with a communications degree. And the reason people take communications in college, I'll tell you firsthand, it's easy. That's what they say. And it's kind of true. But regardless, an education at Cornell led Bill Nye to a job for Boeing, working on 747s. And then he won a Steve Martin lookalike contest, which started his career in comedy And then pretty much one thing after another tells you about the little breaks that he had along the way. Gets on that local TV show that he had with a few of his comedy buddies. And here we go. He's Bill Nye the Science Guy. It's funny where life takes you. Who knows, this guy might still be working for Boeing if he didn't win that Steve Martin look-alike contest. Hey, by the way, thanks for all the great reviews. This one from World by Mark, who writes, great concept and wonderful to hear celebrities discuss various aspects of their lives and how fate changed the direction of their lives. Another one, my favorite new podcast, What a Hidden Gem. And Houdini's writes, I've known Jeff for years from the radio industry. The podcast is amazing with awesome guests. Thank you so much. Don't forget to leave your review and, of course, a 5-star rating if you like this podcast on Apple Podcast or Spotify, wherever you pod. Until next week, this has been another episode of the Celebrity Jobber Podcast. I'm Jeff Zito, and thanks for listening.
The Podcast Playground. Hooray!
As the new year unfolds, make it a year of comfort and indulgence with Minky Couture. Wrap yourself in the lap of luxury with our exquisite blankets. Picture the cozy moments, the warmth of our premium materials, and the stylish designs that define Minky Couture. Welcome the new year with the ultimate in comfort and sophistication. January is your month to embrace luxury. Visit minkycouture.com or your nearest store today. Elevate your comfort, elevate your style with Minky Couture.